can plead guilty. I lead with it's your right to plead not guilty because you are presumed not guilty. And I think it's important for me to set that tone with people to let them know that they are sitting in a forum where they know there are a fair ear, a fair process, and access to justice. That is my core commitment. So you all have the right to come before the court and to plead your case. It will not happen the same day you come on an arraignment. That will be at some point that the court will set off in the future, and we'll discuss the our new normal at later on as we go forward in the discussion. But I want each of you all to know that you have that right. It is your constitutional right to come before the court for a bench trial or a jury trial before your peers. And if you and I have folk who appear before me and Judge Akinyele as well, who will say, well, I just want to just plead guilty, get it over with. I don't have time. I will not accept their plea of guilty because the standard is that it must be given fairly, willingly, knowingly, and voluntarily. And if I don't feel those elements are met, I will not accept the plea, and I will order them back for a full hearing when all the parties are there so that they can have the fair access to justice.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking that angle. Maybe Tunde, I want to say congratulations for being resilient. I remember the first time you ran for judge. I was here and I knew how far you got. I remember the second time you ran, and I know the third time you ran. And you, out of 7 candidates, you pushed a runoff into that election. To me, that's success right there, because you came to the table with nothing and you were able to force that election into a runoff. So Judge Ramsey have talked to us about our rights to come before the court and seek redress. Can you talk to us about, as African Americans with Nigerian origin, what we need to do to get involved in the community, supporting people that are running for election? I know we got the money, they write the checks, but sometimes volunteering for somebody, doing phone banks for somebody, can you talk to us about that? Because you've been through all that gamut.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are some Nigerian organizations that you are also well aware of that are very politically astute. The question is how to parlay that to the overall population, how to make sure that it spreads, it catches on to everybody else. Initially, when I ran, I think I first ran about 10 years ago, some of the, and I think you probably faced that too, like you would have the issue of what the heck do you think you're doing mentality. Like, who do you think you are? You are a foreigner in this country. Why do you think you can do this? Or why are you even doing this? So it's not always something positive that even came out of our own communities. That's what we, which I'm sure you got into that as well. So you had to overcome the stigma that you have within your own community of people telling you that you are not either good enough to run for that office, or you are, I guess, for lack of a better word, you are, what's the word I'm looking for? We are saying that you're better than the rest of us for even trying, okay? That's one stigma that we all have to overcome, because Judge Ramsey will tell you that we face that even in the African-American community as well. So it's almost like, and then you face the same thing in the white community as well. So it's almost like, every community you are in, it's almost like you're facing that same hurdle, okay? Now, with the fact that Barack Obama ran, that kind of elevated a lot of us, to know that someone that has what we quote unquote a foreign name can become the president of the United States. It's something that made a lot of folks feel that, if he can do it, so can I, so can other folks, okay? But Judge Ramsey is also right that, when folks did not come back out 2 years later, and I'll tell you, a lot of folks in the Nigerian community, in the African community, even in the African-American community, a lot of people just took it for granted that, oh yeah, once I get this person with this African name into power, that's good enough. No, it's not good enough. You have to keep participating. And that's the message that I would get to the Nigerian community in, as one, and even to the general African-American community, that you can have one step forward and two steps backwards if you're not careful. And that's, that's exactly, for lack of, that's probably what we're going through right now, because folks refused, or they did not realize that they needed to parlay the goodwill or the successes of that presidency into something even greater. And that's one thing I would like to channel to my folks in my community, in the greater community, that guess what, folks, we have to get out and vote. I picked up the absentee ballot this week. I filled mine out, I mailed it out. And that stuff is not easy. Let's not kid ourselves. If you have somebody that's not well versed in voting, some folks don't know they have to flip the back page. They don't know they have to sign. They don't know they have to print their names. They don't know they have to date it. Those are all things, and I think I posted on my Facebook page this week, that I've filled mine out. People can private message me if they have any questions, because some of us know which, I guess the qualities of whatever folks are running in the various races. And congrats to Judge Ramsey again for not having opposition. So I'm sure, he's got his vote. I'm not allowed to say I publicly voted for him, but he's a good man. So, so those are the things I think we need to do in the Nigerian community and in the great African American community as well.
Okay, thank you. So we're getting some questions here, and
well, may I just jump in before you get to the next one? And I did digress just a little bit, in my response. But what I'll say to members of the Nigerian community, get involved. Get involved, because oftentimes people get elected who are so sorely unqualified, but simply because no one else will step up to take on that task or that responsibility. But when you do see people who are willing to put themselves out there, to do the work, to knock on the doors, to ask for your support, if nothing else, give it to them. Write a check, because especially in the African American community, that's our biggest issue, is getting our community. It's hard enough to get them to vote, but to get someone to write a check is a really, really difficult matter. When I was in the state Senate for 9 years, I would dare say 10% of my donations during the election period was from my community. Everything else was from interest groups that wanted to talk to me at the Capitol, okay? And yes, I cashed their checks, but guess what? When they came to talk to me, I still held my standard, my community standard, that if I can't explain it to you, to my wife, and to you in the grocery store on Saturday, I should not be doing it. So I will say to everyone, you must get involved, because understand, the people that you elect to the city council, to the mayor, they're the ones that's going to appoint the police chief and the municipal court judge. And those are the people who are going to be judging you in your community. That's why I said all politics is local. So instead of complaining about it, be about it. You've heard that. Let's take Ferguson, for example. We had the opportunity with all those people, and I blame all those civil rights organizations that went to Ferguson. Nobody in any of those civil rights organizations asked someone to find them the sharpest 20 Black people in that town. And they should have been running those folk for every local office in that town in that next election cycle. That's how you change the culture. You change the people in those seats who are making poor and discriminatory decisions.
Yeah, Judge, thank you very much for that. I couldn't tell my community better about the issue of participating in politics and writing that check, and I'm glad that you say that. And I must tell you, on behalf of my community, they don't have a problem writing the check. The problem is that sometimes there's no bridge and people just don't reach out to them. And actually what happened tonight is probably one of the benefits of writing those checks, because the lieutenant from the sheriff's department, they canceled at the last minute and I was able to call, Chief Lumpkin 30 minutes to this show, and he got Chief Moses to come online to be with us today. If when I called the chief, he didn't even know who I was, where do I begin to do that?
That's
so,
right.
These are some of the things that but let's go ahead and take some of the questions from the participants. Dr. Ifeanyi Anipe wants to know, and Moses, Chief, this is for you. He said, how can one independently get to internal affairs? I think you spoke about this earlier, but I don't know if you was there when you, how can a citizen get to internal affairs?
I don't have the number with me, but it's simply a call, a complaint to the precinct commander, a call directly to the lieutenant in charge of internal affairs. Every citizen in DeKalb County has a right to call and complain on any officer that they feel mistreated by, and you don't have to go through any red tape. Just call the department, get the number to internal affairs, and ask to speak to the supervisor or one of the investigators. They will take the complaint and follow up on it.
But can I add something to that, Chief? I think it may be good. It may be good to tell the participants the impact of a complaint against a police officer with internal affairs. So you must be very careful that whatever complaint that you're making is legitimate and that you have the basis for those complaints, because those things can affect their promotion. It can affect a lot of things in their department. So I think we need to be very mindful to make sure that, that there are extreme cases before we do that. Is that correct?
That is correct. And you must understand that you must be truthful in your statements, because don't you turn around and get charged with giving a false statement to the police department. So you have to be factual. The police will do the investigation, but it must be something that's very factual, that can be proven, and that's correct. The worst thing you can do is make a complaint and it's not justifiable, or you give a falsehood when you make that complaint. But everyone has the right and the ability to call the department and speak to someone in internal affairs.
Okay, this question was specifically from Dr. Stella Mokeji, and it's for Judge Ramsey or Judge Tunde. He said, what was the most motivating factor that led you into politics?
Well, I'll jump in first since I've been in it just a little bit longer. I was actively engaged in my community before I was engaged in politics. Service is what is the underlying and compelling reason for anybody to be in the public sphere, in my view. When as soon as I passed the bar exam, I had a good job with the federal government. I didn't need to do anything but just go home and drink a beer and watch TV. But I wanted to give back. And so I would then go spend a couple of hours in my evenings volunteering for the NAACP as their legal redress director. And I would take calls from citizens in the evenings about matters that was going on. And as a result of that service, that voluntary service, I was approached by then the vice mayor of the city of Stone Mountain, Georgia. You all still know him, Representative Billy Mitchell. He said, Ron, the city of Stone Mountain is looking to appoint its first African-American as a judge in the history of Stone Mountain, Georgia. And at the time I looked behind me to see if he was talking to someone else. And I said, well, are you talking to me? He said, yes. I said, I've only been an attorney for 7 years. There are plenty of people more qualified than me. He said, that may be true, but there are not many more committed than you. And because of that service, then I became the first African-American judge in the history of Stone Mountain, Georgia. And I served there for 7 years. And then after our state senator vacated her seat, I wasn't seeking that seat, but I was called by someone who said, the senator's vacating that seat, we want you to run for that seat. And I said, I wasn't interested in running for that seat, but they said, you're the kind of individual we need in that seat. And if you will say yes, we will help you. And that's how I was elected to the state senate. There were eight people in that race, and some very popular, some very powerful, some married to powerful folks. But as a result of people knowing who I am and my commitment to the community, I was blessed to prevail. And I'll share with you that after serving in the Senate for 9 years, I was offered the opportunity for the job that I currently hold, and I turned it down at the Capitol because what was on the table before me was in my best interest, but not in the best interest of my community. And so when I got back on the floor, the floor leader for the governor said, "Oh, you blew it. You had that." And I said, "Well, you know what? I blew it then." And guess what? That opportunity came back to me. And had I been one to have compromised my community for self, I wouldn't have been given that second opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Tunde, you want to chime in on that?
Sure. I think for me, it's quite similar. It's about bridging the gap between the community and the system. Those of us that have been in the system for so long, we obviously are better versed about the things that go on. And we can then be the linchpin or the link between making sure that the system is working right for the people, link that to the people themselves. I always try not to consider judges as politicians, even though we run for office. I don't, because I'm a municipal court judge and I'm also a part-time judge. But most judges do run for office, and they have to walk the fine line between politics and doing the legal work and making sure that they don't appear to be partisan. It's a good thing that in Georgia, judges are no longer required, for the most part, to declare their partisan, what do you call it, their party. It used to be so. I think that was, I think it was in '95 or something that they stopped doing that, other than maybe magistrate courts in some cases and some probate judges. But again, it's just linking back to the community and making sure that they know what's going on in the system. That's the reason why I got involved.
Okay, thank you very much. We got a couple more questions coming up. Chief Moses, one is for you, and then Tunde, the judges, I'll come back to. One has to do with profiling, and I'll read that, Chief Moses, why you think about that. I'm going to read the other one. One is from Ugo. He said, profiling has become the norm for Blacks and affects us all and our children. What are some of the tips that you could tell us to mitigate profiling from both the police and the judge's view? So Moses, I'm going to let you think about that, but let me read the other question for the judges. And this one is from Dr. Otto. He said, as a Black man, if you know you're innocent, can you refuse police officers searching your vehicle? I've seen white men do it, but is it safe for us to say no? Any of the judges can take that. Yeah.
Oh, you want us to take that first?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Dr. Alta, the issue is whether or not there is probable cause for the officer to ask to search your vehicle, okay? I touched upon what I brought up earlier on about the 3 tiers of police-citizen encounters: the general encounter, the reasonable articulable suspicion for the stop, and then probable cause for the search, seizure, or arrest. So like if the officer asks you to search your vehicle, generally, yes, you can refuse if you've done nothing wrong. However, if the officer says, I smelled marijuana in your vehicle, and that is always the #1 basis for searches that we come across in the court system. Officer has probable cause to search your vehicle by smelling marijuana in your vehicle. So you see that within a lot of kids, a lot of African-American kids, they are more prone to it. Now, it doesn't mean that white kids don't smoke marijuana, but if you are in an area, in a community where an officer is predisposed to searching your vehicle, and you have your teenager having marijuana in the vehicle, the officer is going to tell your teenager to get out of the vehicle and search that vehicle. So that's the conundrum that we face on a daily basis. These kids that, they're doing some things they shouldn't be doing, which gives the officer probable cause to search the vehicle. So that's the first thing. So if you've not done anything wrong, though, the law allows you to refuse the search. The most the officer can do is bring, if they think it's narcotics in your vehicle, they bring a dog. They do what's called an open air sniff. They'll have the dog check your car, and if you've done nothing wrong, they have to let you go. So that will be the simple answer. But again, you have to take that answer with a caveat as to what is the officer's motive and what is the predisposition of that officer, and do you just want to escalate? My fallback is always call for the supervisor rather than escalate. Okay?
And okay. Just let me
hold on, Judge Akinyele, please, before you go, let me circle back a little bit. Some of the things you mentioned now, you mentioned at the opening, and I was listening for a reference to Miranda rights. So right. At what point does the Miranda rights intersect with the notions of reasonable suspicion and the probable cause?
In most cases, it does not, unless you are placed in custody and you're subject to questioning. So that's the confusion. A lot of people, when the call is like, oh, he never read me my rights. He does not, any officer does not have to read you your rights at the time they ask you to search your vehicle. They are only required to read your rights once you've been placed in custody and you are being questioned or interrogated. So they're just having you step out of your vehicle, they don't have to read your rights. Telling you they smell marijuana, I want to search your vehicle, they don't have to read your rights. Those are all the, and I know that's the intersection right there. Is that I guess that's as simple as I can put it.
And if I could just interject, please don't give the officers probable cause. I sit in court day after day along with Judge Akinyele and just scratching my head because you know what the two most common cases of probable cause are? Not wearing a seatbelt and having a cell phone to your ear. And then that officer then finds out 10 other things wrong that you then become charged with. And then thousands of dollars later and 12 months of probation or perhaps jail time, you know, you suffered all of that just because you were not wearing a seatbelt or you were holding a cell phone in full view of a police officer who was driving past you, minding his or her own business until you gave them probable cause. So please remember that, you know, caution your family, your young children who may be drivers. Don't give them, I mean, they may want to stop you just because, as you've heard of the profile, but they don't have that articulable suspicion and probable cause to do so unless you help them along with that. So please be very, very aware of that.
Okay, thank you, judges. So Chief Moses, you got two police questions here.
Okay.
One is on the profiling, and the other one is another question from Amarachi. Say, if a police officer stops you in a place you perceive to be unsafe, what do you do? So you could take those two together, Chief Moses.
Okay, first of all, I would say that 98% of the police departments have a no profiling policy. That doesn't mean that an officer is not going to profile you. An officer is going to look at anybody that has suspicious activity. That's not profiling. That looks at this fits that looks a little out of place. I was an undercover drug officer for 10 years. I could pick out someone that was dealing heavily in the drugs. I wasn't profiling them, but because of their activities, it made me pay closer attention than I would have. There is not supposedly a police officer out there that has been told you need to go out and profile certain people. You just don't do that. And we try to train our officers that that's not an activity you get involved in. But we can't train them not to look at things that people bring to their attention that is suspicious activity. And what was the second question, sir?
The second question was, if a police officer stops you in an area where you perceive to be unsafe, what should you do? If you feel that you're being stopped in a place that's not lit properly, you have the right to turn your interior light on your car, drive slowly to some place you feel, whether it's a service station or a well-lit place,
you have that right. And you can call 911 and say that I have an officer following me. I'm going to stop, but I'm going to pull over in a well-lit place where I feel safe.
Okay. Now, this is a question that I think pertains to a lot of families. And Judge Ramsey, I believe this bill was passed in the Senate when the Senate, it was the SB 440. You know, it was the 7 deadly sins. And now I realize that the judge has increased that to 10 deadly sins. And a lot of parents here have teenage children in their household. You know, what can we tell these parents to talk to their kids about certain kinds of crimes that can land them not just in juvenile justice, but straight to the adult system, you know, because culturally, some of these things, they may not be aware. So what are the things that you need to tell our parents on this call tonight to just talk to their kids about the importance about not taking certain things for a joke, because it could really land you into serious trouble?
That's a great question. And I'm certain that everyone on this call are responsible parents, and they raise their kids to be responsible young adults. But remember that old adage, be careful of the company that you keep. There are 2 young men walking around right now who are very successful simply because I was able to intervene with the district attorney before their cases even went to court. And this was well before I became a judge. This was when I was a private attorney. But for example, one young man had just graduated from high school, had a full scholarship to Morehouse, was at Morehouse for the summer enrichment program, and was walking down the street with a friend of his. Unbeknownst to him, the friend was stopping people and strong arm robbing them right on the street. And so, of course, when they both were arrested, he was charged with the same thing as the friend. And because of my community intervention with elected officials, that we must all engage with them on all levels, I was able to go to the district attorney and said, I know this child, I know this young man, I know his family. I was able to argue the profile, and as a result, that young man today is a high-level corporate manager with AT&T in New Jersey right now. And otherwise, he would have been looking at 20 years in prison. So another case in point, had another young man, his older brother grew up with my son, got a call from a friend, hey, can you drop me by the store? Well, I'm headed to school right now, but hey, can you just drop me? Okay, I'll pick you up. On the way, hey, can you stop and pick up my friend? Hey, I'm gonna be late for class. He lives around the corner. They stop and pick up the friend. Oh, I have to stop at the store. I'm late for class. It'll just take 2 minutes. Well, guess what? Both of them come out of the store after having robbed the store. And so he was looking at 20 years of prison as an accomplice to robbery. Again, I was able to implore upon the district attorney. My relationship with the parents, that community profile, the students' success up to that point had not been in any trouble, but it doesn't always happen that way. And because you may not be engaged in the community with a Tunde or Ron Ramsey or your local district attorney that you wrote a check to or that you went to a rally to and who's seeing you out in the community, you may not get that benefit of the doubt about your child when that circumstance reaches your door. So again, tell your children to be very careful of the company that they keep, because there are, I mean, even kids who come from families who are doing well. I have some friends who live over in the $400,000 community near, not that far from mine. I don't live in one, but I'll tell you, those very same children were leaving MLK High School to rob their neighbors' houses at lunchtime. I mean, what kind of sense does that make? But yet they will do it. So don't be afraid to go in your children's rooms, because that house belongs to you. You investigate what's happening in your own house under your own roof. And that car that your child is driving, I'm sure you paid for it. You're paying for the insurance. You have every right to search everything, because if you don't take the time to do it now, you may pay the consequences for it later.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question from Obi. Obi, this is a follow-up question to Chief Moses. Why is it so difficult for the police union to call out bad actors in the system? It seems that whatever happens, the police department and the union always side with the police officers regardless of their conduct.
No. If you wanted to file open records, you would see how many cops, police officers are dismissed for bad conduct throughout the state of Georgia. You can file open records with any police department you want to, and they will provide you with that as long as it's not an ongoing investigation. But several police officers throughout the year in DeKalb County are dismissed for misconduct. It's not condoned. No police agency wants bad characters in their department. And before I leave that, let me say this. Let me encourage the Nigerian organizations to invite members from the police department recruiting sections to their meetings so that we might have an opportunity to recruit more Nigerian youth to become reserve officers and to become police officers within DeKalb County to help change the culture of it.
Thank you very much. I have a question from Kelechi now. I'm going to file a disclaimer before I ask this question. Because,
okay.
It says, it's for the judge. He said, I live in a state where marijuana has been decriminalized. Can they still stop and search you for smelling marijuana in your vehicle?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's a simple, I guess, response. For example, let me give, here's another example. Marijuana is still illegal under federal law. Okay, so for example, if you live in California where I think Oregon, where marijuana is legal, you have marijuana on your person, you're traveling by plane, interstate, you come through the airport in Atlanta, they find marijuana, you will be arrested in Atlanta if it's something they feel they can arrest you on. So just because it's legal in your state does not mean it's legal federally, and it does not mean it's legal in other states. And I've had situations before where people inadvertently transported it because they did live in a marijuana legal state, and they went through the airport and they were charged with the offense here.
And just like alcohol is legal, but if you consume too much of it and the officer smells that, then that's reasonable suspicion as well. And you can be searched and arrested for that. So the same with marijuana, because you can be impaired as a result of the use of that substance.
Okay, generally these sessions last for 1 hour, and I see it's 9:16. I've got one more question on here, and after that, we're just gonna have like open mic for anybody who wants to ask a question. The next question, I think it goes for anybody. Say, if a police officer coerces you into refusing to be tested for DUI and arrest you for the same offense when in actuality you were not drunk, what recourse do you have as a citizen?
Well, the question is, coerces you into refusing?
Yes, I've never heard that before. So,
Yeah,
well, that's like
I've never heard that myself. So,
well, that's like a negative, is what it sounds like to me. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you have the right to refuse, is what it is. And here's the question: if you refuse in Georgia, then you're facing a 1-year license suspension, administrative suspension, and that's the issue. Your recourse at that point is to go appeal your administrative suspension, which you have 30 days to file for such with the Office of, the Department of Driver Services. And they'll schedule a hearing before the Office of State Administrative Hearings. And the judges, in most cases, they'll reverse it if there's really a very weak probable cause, or you can work out something with the officers. That's what most lawyers do. To reverse the administrative suspension and then go deal with the DUI case in court. Because a DUI refusal is more difficult for the prosecutor to prove. which is why the state has more or less made it mandatory that your license will be revoked for 1 year if you refuse the test for DUI. And that's the reason why, but you need to appeal the administrative suspension. That's the first step you need to take.
Okay. Judge Ramsey, you have anything to add to that?
Oh, he answered that very well. Thank you.
Okay, let me look for more questions. Okay, another question for Chief Moses. As a Black man in uniform, how do you navigate through the general mistrust between the Black community and the uniformed police officers?
It's easy. I'm honest with both. I respect both. I treat both in a very professional manner. I'm well known in my community as in the other communities that I've worked in as being a fair, honest, ethical person. And that's the way I'm looked at by the officers as well as people within my community. It's a matter of a leader carrying themselves as a leader and acting as a leader and understanding and listening to both sides.
Okay. Now, Chief Moses, I really appreciate the invitation that you threw out there, the open invitation that you threw out to the Nigerian community. Can I ask you, as a minority, can you share with us some of the incentives that the departments, your departments, put out there to attract the diverse community into coming into the police department, if there's any?
Yes, we send people to different organizations that we know that have certain group of people. If you look at one of our recruiting pictures, you will see someone from Hispanic. I think we have a Muslim kid on one. We try to make the pictures, the recruitment material. We try to make it as diverse as possible so that anyone looking at it will feel like they can fit in. We have some very exciting young people coming in at 21 years old that don't think like the old timers think. They are a different breed of police officers. And I think that young Nigerian officers could bring a lot of good information about the Nigerian community to the police department. And it could help change if there is any cultural differences between the Nigerians and the officers. I think that's the pathway to changing it and them understanding each other.
Okay, another one for the police. You know, we don't get a chance to get the chief of police or the panel, so they're going to get the pound of flesh tonight, Chief Moses. Another one for you. He said, we know when a grand jury is paneled, in majority of the cases, there's an indictment. Why is it so difficult to get an indictment against a police brutality case? If indicted, it seems that they get free or lesser sentence. Why is that so?
You know, we in management often think the same thing, but all we can do is present the case to the 23 citizens on the grand jury, and we have no influence whatsoever on what they come out with. You know, the laws have been changed where now a police officer must testify, where before he or she didn't have to testify. So the laws are changing so that the police officers don't feel they are so protected by a grand jury. They now must face the music, just like the person making the complaint against them or the action or the crime that they have committed. They must answer to the grand jury. We're hoping that the grand jury will see things through a different set of eyes once that police officer get up there and testifies. But there is no pressure ever put on a judge, a grand jury, a case slanted to make it become in favor of the police officer. It's just that the average citizen wants to believe the police are right.
Okay, this is for all three members of our panel. It has to do with the Second Amendment, gun ownership. What are the restrictions for owning a gun here in Georgia? Despite the obvious one of not, you know, if you're a felon, of course, you're not. Are there any restrictions, and what can you tell our community about that? Because culturally, guys, you know, most of our people are not used to that. Even the sound of gun could probably make some folks lose their breath. But I encourage people to do that. I encourage people to to make sure that they police their own house. You know, what are there any restrictions in owning a gun in the state of Georgia, if any? And that was from Dr. Chris Ezani.
Yeah, I can.
Go ahead, Judge.
Yeah, well, in addition to being a felon, obviously, if you're mentally ill, that's one. You have to have had some kind of diagnosis of mental illness. And the problem with that is sometimes that does not show up during background checks. And so folks that are mentally ill, unfortunately, sometimes still have access to weapons. The other two areas where that prevents you from getting weapons is if you have a domestic violence conviction. Domestic violence, as in family violence, battery, under federal law. I think a lot of people are not aware of this. You are permanently banned from owning a gun for the rest of your life, okay? Under federal law, if you have a domestic violence conviction, okay? Wow. So you have a lot of people that come in thinking they're just pleading guilty to a misdemeanor family violence battery. They tell you to take a 6-month class, and then they are banned from having a weapon forever. When I sit in state court, I bring that to their attention, whether or not, even though, interestingly enough, we're not required to tell folks that. But I do, because I think, you know, it's your Second Amendment right to own a weapon. If you made a mistake of some kind, did the offense that you did, should it carry that burden for the rest of your life? So I always bring it up to their attention. And some people still say, yeah, I want to plead to the case. And then the final area is a protective order. If you have a temporary or permanent protective order against you, you are not allowed to carry a weapon as well. You are placed on a registry that prevents you from owning a weapon.
Any Judge?
Well, I'll just add that if anyone's interested in getting a firearms license, the probate judge is responsible for issuing those licenses. So in DeKalb County, they are on the basement floor of the main courthouse, and typically will be in the main courthouse or somewhere in the vicinity of the clerk of courts or the probate judge in most counties.
Can I also chime in a little bit with respect to you've seen in the news of late of people openly carrying in many states. Georgia is an open carry state as well. But you, correct, as a Black person, if you carry an assault type style rifle in the airport, which I've seen white folks carry, you know what's going to happen to you. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. Okay, right. It applies to certain groups, but you know, I would not suggest to anybody to start open carrying walking down the street in Georgia, because you will have 5 police vehicles surrounding you right away. Now, Georgia allows you to have a weapon without a license in 2 places in your vehicle, concealed. In your glove box, as long as it's unchambered, and in your trunk of your vehicle. Otherwise, you have to have a concealed permit to have a weapon in your car. Otherwise, you can have the gun on your hip and walk down the street. As long as that prevents you.
Okay, this is more of an immigration issue, and also I may have a follow-up on that. He said, does being a green card holder restrict you from owning a gun?
Being a green card holder?
Correct.
Yes, you have to be a United States citizen to own a weapon. That is absolutely correct. And and as a matter of fact, you can't get folks in trouble, because when you're applying for a concealed permit or you're trying to ship a weapon, they ask you, are you a U.S. citizen? And if you put in there yes, that can in fact prevent you from ever getting your citizenship, because automatically you discredited for having provided a false information. Yes, you have to be a U.S. citizen to own a weapon.
Okay, and that would be a good follow-up to Judge. I know both of you sit in the state court. Can you talk to our folks about the implications of traffic stop and what the repercussions could be with immigration? Because I noticed lately, sometimes when people come to even to traffic courts, is there an obligation? Is there an obligation to the judge to report such cases to immigration? Even after adjudication, is there what do people need to watch out? Not that we have illegal aliens in tonight, but just in case for them to be aware.
No, there's no obligation for a judge to report their immigration status. In fact, judges are required to advise non-citizens to seek counsel of an immigration attorney prior to entering a plea, so that the court can then be assured that they have received adequate counsel as to how the entry of a plea or being found guilty of a crime may impact their immigration status.
Okay, one more question I have. This is a question from President Ugo. He said, please ask for me. A cop said that I ran a stop sign and I know I did not. What is acceptable defense in court?
Okay, that's a good one. Go ahead, Judge.
Well, you know, what I will say to that is that every individual case turns on its individual facts. And if you want to take the time out of your schedule to come to court to convince me that you did not run that red light or that stop sign, and you are earnest in your presentation, a judge is bound by the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, which means that if there's any doubt in the judge's mind based on your presentation of the facts versus the police officer's version of the facts, then that judge must find you not guilty.
Right. Yeah, and that's the fine line that we have to deal with on a daily basis when we're trying such cases, because it's a he said, or he said, she said case, and we have to figure out based on what we hear, you know, who do we find credible in the testimony, and what's the basis for the issuing of the citation. But I've had several stop sign violations that I found not guilty in the past. So it's a case by case basis, as Judge Ramsey said.
And you must give citizens the benefit of that their credibility is just as strong as the credibility of a police officer. I'll tell you a lesson that I learned early when I had probably been a municipal court judge for about a year, when I had a gentleman come to court for a stop sign violation, and he was adamant there is no stop sign there. The officer was adamant that there is. And I had a morning session, and I said, okay, I'm gonna take a lunch break, and then I'll see you all back at 1 o'clock. I went to the site. The stop sign was not there, okay? And so the officer had to admit, well, it used to be there. Oh yeah, it did get knocked down about 3 or 4 years ago. So why are you still writing citations for a stop sign that you know is not properly erected? Now I'll tell you, we had an officer that he often wrote citations that came to my court since I've been a state court judge. And it was just something about his demeanor, Chief.
Yes, sir.
I just didn't feel comfortable about his demeanor, but I'm gonna tell you, I ruled in his favor, and my spirit bothered me the rest of the day. And on my way home, I went by that location at I-285 and Covington Highway, and there was absolutely no way that he could have seen four wheels not come to a complete stop at 2 o'clock in the morning, okay? Because there's a giant berm there that's 20 feet high. And it bothered me. And the next time he came to my court, he had a new revelation of me. And I think he's been back in my court twice since in 4 years, because I made it known to him and all the other officers that were sitting there, do not come in here and lie, because there's just enough activity for police to respond to accidents, which are going to happen, and egregious traffic conduct that you must address. Don't sit somewhere at 2 o'clock in the morning and prey on helpless people, and don't lie on helpless people and citizens. I will not tolerate that.
And that was good. That was a good thing, Judge.
Okay, so I'm going to be very respectful of our time. I really want to thank our panelists. Before I make our closing remarks, if each of you could give us a minute or two closing remarks, and I really want to thank you for coming. Chief Moses, please make sure, well, go ahead and talk. Make sure you tell Jack Lumpkins that, that we really appreciate him acting so fast for us. So if we want to start with Chief Moses.
Okay, I just want to tell the Nigerian community that there is no bias culture against you in the police department. And I've been there now off and on for about 10 years. But I would like to encourage you to obey the laws, to be safe, but to encourage you to get involved with our recruitment program, because I would love to see us running with 200 or 300 Nigerian officers in the future. So if there's anything you can do to make understanding better between the two cultures, is to get young people involved and want to go into law enforcement. Thank you for inviting us, and I will let the director know.
Judge Tunde.
Yes, I would also add that, Chief Hector mentioned reporting cases to Internal Affairs if you feel like your rights have been violated. And you touched upon the fact that it has to have a merited reason why, not just because you're upset at something. It has to have a real violation. I would add also that before you even reach that stage, get involved with your police department. The Cap County Police has had police citizen meetings for years that I'm aware of, that they'll bring you in. You spend a whole day in the headquarters. Chief Hector, do you all still do that?
Yes.
Yes. And you will learn everything from beginning to end about the police department. They will take you to the records room, to the 911 call center, so you'll learn how 911 call operates. You'll see them in action. You can even request rides with police officers, so you can see what probable cause is. Those are all things that the police department affords to all citizens. Just schedule it with the police department and do it. And other than that, I would also add, if you are called to court for a jury trial, you have a jury summons, please participate. It is a civic duty that we all need to get involved in. I think the judicial system is a beautiful thing in this country. We want to make sure that everyone's rights are protected. And so God bless you all, and stay safe from COVID.
Judge Ramsey.
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak to members of the Nigerian community. Again, I apologize for being tardy on the call, but these kinds of conversations are necessary for us to all be comfortable with each other. I'm honored to have great friends from Abuja and River State, and I've been trying to get Colet to meet them when they come, but he's just always so busy when they're here. We haven't had the opportunity to do so. But what I will implore you all to do is get involved. There's other cultures, other nationalities have no lock or right on being representatives of our communities. You have just as much right as anyone else. You're citizens of this country to run for political office and to be active and to be engaged. And that's actually what makes a difference. Again, all politics are local, and if people know you, then they're going to hear you. If you are engaged, there's an old saying again that, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so by being involved in your community, you automatically get the benefit of the doubt. You get the benefit of any opportunity because you're not a foreigner, so to speak. You are a part of the community, a part of the fabric of that community. So if you don't know how to get engaged, call Colet. He'll tell you how to get engaged. Any of you have the right to come and sit and view our judicial proceedings anytime that you would like. Just like you have the right to, do drive-alongs with the police and fire and whatnot. So we're happy to have you. We're happy to bring your children into our courtrooms. Now it appears it's going to be virtual for a while, but we're happy to do that. We're happy to put on a virtual forum for your young people as well, to allow them to become engaged in the political process and the judicial process, so that they're our future, they're our leaders of tomorrow. So the best way to get them prepared for that is to get them engaged now.
Thank you very much. I do want to say on behalf of the Nigerian community, Judge Ramsey, Judge Tunde, and Chief Moses, I want to thank you guys for taking time out to be with us tonight. It's been a wonderful 90 minutes. We've gotten a lot of information that we didn't know before. And Tunde, Judge Tunde and Judge Ramsey, I think what you guys were talking about was the Ride Along program. I encourage members of our community to do that. I've done it many times, different shifts. And you're entitled to it. Just go to your police department, tell them you want to ride along. You know, just make sure you clean, and they'll give you the opportunity to ride with the police, so you can actually see what these police officers, you know, what they encounter during their shift. But I do also want to tell you guys that for the most part, Nigerian citizens here are law-abiding citizens. We come here, they go to school and just work. Oftentimes, they don't really get involved, not because they don't want to get involved, because they don't know how. And conversations like this will give us the opportunity to know how that they can actually have a judge come into the community to talk to us, have the chief of police send somebody to come and talk to us, and stuff like that. I think is a good conversation. You know, we could build a greater force once we align together as a people to work together for the political good of our race. There are a lot of communications coming up now, just throwing up all kinds of divisive comments between Africans and African Americans. You know, all these things are just distractions to create divisions among people. And I want to implore nobody on this panel to believe that. We're good folks. We're very hospitable people. We're non-violent individuals. And we're not better than anybody else, but we appreciate you taking time out to be with us tonight. And Chief Moses, please make sure you tell Jack Lumpkin that we couldn't have, I don't know how else to say thank you. He got a call at 6:30, I think 7:30 this evening, and he made sure that you were here because, you know, the sheriff's department had some other obligations. And Tunde got married today. He set that aside to be with us. Judge Ramsey.
I saw that ring, Tunde. Congratulations. I was going to ask you about that later, brother.
Thank you, sir.
He's off the market. He's off the market. So
all right. Well, listen. Well, call me in 35 years. I'll tell you how it is.
And then Judge Ramsey celebrated his 35 years of marriage this week. He just came back from his anniversary and just got on and got in. But you know, there's no other way to do it. He's a judge. He's a capital man. There's no other way that we do it other than, you know, delivering good services like this. So I just want to appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys wonderfully, and thank you very much. And anytime that you need this community, please feel free to get in touch with any one of us. We'll be there for you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Colette, may I add one thing? Everyone on the call, if you have a pending citation, if anyone in your family or friends have a pending citation, do not show up at a courthouse right now, okay? Only non-essential matters are not being heard. Again, only essential matters that impact your immediate liberty. So if you have a question about your case, call the court or email the court. Someone will respond back to you. Right now in DeKalb State Court, we are working aggressively on developing a process where we can go ahead and have your cases pre-negotiated with the state in many instances so that we can resolve your cases virtually, either by a means such as a Zoom or by entering a plea in absentia with the consent of all the parties. The judge will then review all of the pleadings and then will approve your plea, and then you'll simply be directed how to comply, whether that's pay a fine or whatever, and then your case will be closed and you'll never have to set foot in the courthouse. So that is going to be our new normal. So look for some innovation coming out of the state of the DeKalb County Traffic Division to make life much simpler for our citizens going forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. On that note, good night, everybody. Stay home, stay safe, and stay alive.
Thank you, Colet.
God bless you. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Hugo, last time I logged off too early. I'm gonna wait.
I think everybody is running for the hills now. So,
Well, thank you, Chairman. That was a very nice presentation. I learned a lot.
I guess thank you. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, and thank you very much. You guys doing wonders. You know, all those information makes difference in our lives. You know.
No, he's a colleague.
Okay.
Who cannot understand your Igbo.
Okay, that's all right.
We should have had Tunde here for them to.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Obi.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
It's a uncle.
I understand. Last time I logged off too early. You guys were cracking jokes, and I missed all the jokes. Casey, okay, Ambassador.
I throw a salute.
Ambassador.
I got Casey. Well done.
Yeah, my people. Ugo. Yeah.
I greet you, sir. So, Omalicha is still in Bahamas, Beacon.
That's what we can see. The first day I'm not film trick on MFA.
No.
Ugo, Colet and Quack, salute all on.
My able treasurer.
I don't see my friend. What's the today?
Obi, I throw a salute.
Because thank you guys. I hope it went well. I hope it served the purpose for the community.
Oh yes.
Yeah, but most people they are late though. The 90 minutes, it wasn't full 90 minutes when we got. I mean, I was the first person to connect, and that was like 10 minutes late. Yet I was the first person.
How can?
No.
How can? Some people joined at 7:45.
Yeah.
Well, I was on about 7:50. So
it wasn't reporting on the number of viewers.
Maybe from your end.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people were on early.
Oh, okay.
You know, by 8:10, most people were about 45, 48 people were on about 8:10.
Exactly, because I took notice of that. Notice of that. But I think overall, the questions were good. And honestly, if you see what I went through to get this chief on, because the lieutenant called me about 6 o'clock, that he had other assignments that just propped up, and you can't say no, you know. So I called his boss, you know. So they got the deputy chief to come in, you know, and be with us, you know.
You did a good job, even with your questions. You know, I was panicking. I always panic, but you did.
I didn't do anything. I didn't write anything down. What did you do? Huh?
You know, I'd already started working on Plan B and C in case Colet screws up. No, thank you. You did an awesome job. I think you know, you couldn't have gotten any better. You know, the questions were.
I'm going to check on Bahamas.
I'm on mute.
Yes.
All right. Darling, I'm going to know. I think next time I'll just have Zoom and just everybody come and talk and drink and be alive.
I'll be you.
All right.
Jesse.
We'll throw some over here.
Okay.